Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Welcome back, gang. Today's episode is one of the most important we've ever produced on the show because we're going to acknowledge several huge financial traps that most entrepreneurs are going to face. Now, we're joined by Mike Michalowicz, who's the author of one of the most important books that I've ever read. I would have to say top 5 of all time, and it's called Profit First. Now, there are 2 primary traps that we're going to discuss today. The first is a vicious cycle that many entrepreneurs are going to experience, and that is the cycle of paying yourself last as the business owner. Now, 99% of the time, if you have expenses that need to be covered, like payroll, in order to keep your business operating, you're going to pay those expenses first, no matter what, even if that means there's not going to be enough money left for you personally at the end of the day to profit or put away in your savings account or whatever it may be. Now, obviously, this increases stress tremendously, and it constantly puts you in a short-term, reactive state of emergency from month to month, week to week, instead of a proactive state of steady, stable growth that reduces your stress and allows you to make better long-term decisions. Now, the second trap we're going to run into has to do with the way that you manage your company's finances. If you're a small business owner with less than 10 employees, there's a very good chance that you run your business by simply looking at the current balance of your checking account. If there's money in there, great. You're going to find a place to spend it. You're going to find a place to invest it until it's gone. And then guess what? You're back to square one once again. And I cannot tell you how common these traps are. Ryan Deiss shared the fact that he went through these same patterns until he found Mike's book. I've gone through them as well for well over 10 years, and so has Mike Michalowicz. All of us have built multiple 8-figure businesses, even 9-figure businesses. So if these are mistakes that the 3 of us have made in the past, there's a very good chance that you're going to make them as well. So if you'll take a few days to implement Mike's system in Profit First, I firmly believe that it will completely change your financial destiny and your relationship long-term with money. Your profits are going to increase, your stress is going to decrease, and you're going to build a much more stable and successful business. So please help me welcome Mike Michalowicz. Mike Michalowicz, welcome to Self-Made Man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Mike, it's a joy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet, you bet. So I found out about you and your work through our mutual friend, Mr. Ryan Deiss, on, I think, a podcast that he posted a few months ago. The book specifically that he was referring to and that I've now gone through is called Profit First. And I got to tell you, I read through the first chapter and I thought you were talking about me. Because the problems that you were discussing, I've lived for 10 to 15 years now as an entrepreneur. So it's like, man, I've got to get Mike on the show. So for those of our audience who are not familiar with you or your work, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, so I also suffer from that truly insidious problem of surviving check by check. Ryan, I met just coincidentally. I was speaking at Entree Leadership. This is an event run by Dave Ramsey. And I was speaking there, and so was Ryan, I believe. And we met at this VIP type of dinner, and amazingly knowledgeable person. I just was lapping up knowledge from that guy. And he also had this similar story, though, of what I think so many of us experience, that entrepreneurship is a few peaks, but it's a lot of valleys. For me, I'd started my own business after college. I had some early peaks. I started the business in the computer integration space, setting up computer systems and networks, but was able to sell that to private equity. I ran a second company that was in computer crime investigation, sold that to a Fortune 500. And if I was just doing the traditional resume, that's the only 2 bullet points I put on there. You know, like proficient at Word and speaks English adequately, like would also be on there. But the reality, I think the most interesting part of my story, because I think we can all relate to this, was the devastating losses I had. So as I was operating those businesses, I was overwhelmed with stress because they were never profitable. I made my money on the exits. Actually, I became so convinced that you make your money on exits, I decided to launch my third company, which was an angel investing company. I'd accumulated some wealth selling my 2 businesses, and I said, clearly I'm just going to start a lot of businesses and then sell them very quickly, and I'll be really rich. Well, I had no right to be in that space. I was chock full of ignorance and arrogance. I started 10 companies and all of them collapsed within about 6 months. All of them were done of starting it. It was so bad, actually, Mike. I was paying bills for companies that didn't even exist anymore. And
been there, done that.
Had that one. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Mike. I remember watching my income account, my checking account dwindle, my personal, my business, dwindling at such a rapid rate, and the stress. But I also, while I logically saw it dwindling, I emotionally couldn't accept it. I really thought that a magic moment would happen. A major client would come in. Someone would want to acquire my horrible business. I really thought it would happen. And it didn't. It was on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2008. This day is emblazoned in my mind and will be forever. I got a call from my accountant, Keith, and he said, Mike, it's our professional opinion that you declare bankruptcy, which is something I didn't do because I didn't feel my creditors were responsible for my own idiocy. But I did have to go home to my family to tell them what was about to happen. We were about to, and we did, lose our house, lose our possessions, our cars. That Viper I was telling you about off air, that left that day too. And I had to tell my daughter that she's no longer going to take horseback riding lessons. It was $10 or $20 for a group lesson, and I was in no position to afford it. And as I was telling my family this, I'm sobbing in front of my wife and 3 children, so ashamed of myself, so angry at myself. My daughter stood up. She was 9 years old at the time, tiny girl, ran out of the room, and I thought she was running away from me. And I'll tell you, when that dark moment happens, and I don't share the story because I want people to feel sympathetic or empathy toward me. I share the story because I believe it's a story of almost every entrepreneur. Maybe it's not around financial trauma. Maybe it's physical abuse or some horrible experience, but we've all been through it. And the solution feels like running away is the best solution. Like when she ran out of the room, as ashamed I was of myself and angry at myself, I also thought that running away to a place where no one knows me, to be in a social setting where I could start again. I don't care if the job was working at McDonald's. I just didn't want to be where I had any friends, was the solution. The thing was, she wasn't running away. She ran to her bedroom to grab her piggy bank, and she ran back down to me and with these big blue eyes looked up at me and said, Daddy, I'll start supporting our family. And that moment, oh man, that moment, if I think about it too long, I'll start getting emotional. It was embarrassing, ashamed. I was also proud of her. It was this weird confluence of emotions and feelings. And it became the seed for a new start. Now, the last part of my story, it wasn't like the next morning I woke up and said, I've got this all figured out now. We're going to crush it. I actually went through 2 years of depression. It's called functional depression. I self-diagnosed here, so that's not professionally diagnosed, but it's the highest level of depression. I self-medicated too. I started drinking a lot. I'm really not a drinker, except during the Super Bowl recently. I felt compelled to drink because I was so bored by the slow score. But I really don't drink much at all. And this period of my life, I drank constantly just to numb feelings and emotions and anger. And it took me about 2 years. I did navigate through that. But during the time, I also started to ask better questions. I was asking, why was I struggling with finances? What was wrong? First saying what was wrong with me. And then I started asking a better question. What's wrong with the process that I'm following? And that became the inception of Profit First. I started it for myself almost 10 years ago. I wrote the book about it, the most recent release about 1.5 years ago. And it's been a system that I wrote really for myself, to save myself. And I'm blessed now. There's well over 100,000 businesses that have implemented it with 3,000 documented case studies. And it's become a new approach that I think many entrepreneurs can easily adapt and adopt into their business.
Can you share really your experiences with kind of the feast or famine cycle that you had around your business and money and how you managed the finances for both?
Oh, yeah. So I used a technique that I call bank balance accounting. Now, my accountant, Keith, I still work with him today, would always say, Mike, for God's sake, never look at your bank balance because it's not reflective of where your business stands. He'd say, look at your balance sheet, your income statement, your cash flow statement, and tie those things in together. And he'd run a budget, have KPIs, know these certain things like your OCR, which is the operating cash ratio, a very critical metric. And while I was listening to him, and I could generally comprehend what he meant. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have time to do that stuff. I have a very, very simple and more effective method. I log into my bank account.
Yep.
If there's money there, I spend it, right? I can spend it. And if there's no money there, panic ensues, sale. It's a very reactionary method. And what I realized is it did cause this feast and famine. When I was rich in money, oh man, could I spend it? And it always felt justified. I need that equipment. I need the new hire. I need the expensive car to impress people, because when I roll up in my expensive car, they'll know how successful I am and need to do business with me. I had all the reasons to have these Class A space and so forth. Nonsense. And when there was no money, well, then panic would ensue, and I would effectively prostitute my business. I would do anything for anybody just to get some more revenue in. It was a very reactionary time.
And I bet were able to pull that off every time as well.
Yeah. Most times I pull it off. But sometimes with dire consequences. I pulled off with my forensics business. We had 30 to 35 employees at this one point during our heyday, and our burn was about. These were very high tech people. I think it was about $400,000, $300,000 a month in salary payroll, which meant I got to land some big cases. And when we landed Enron, that supported it. The next month, when we didn't land anything, it was actually Michael Jackson. True story. Michael Jackson's team called us. He was accused of molesting children. It was purely an accusation. I don't know whatever came of that case, but they decided to go with another forensic investigator. Well, there goes $300,000 of potential revenue out the window, and we were stuck. Enron had finished up. We didn't have any new marquee cases. I didn't have revenue, and I had to lay off half my employees. So I survived, maybe financially, but with dire consequences. I was so ashamed that I couldn't maintain this business, that people were let off, not because of their problems, but because of my problems. So it wasn't, I could survive, but it was a survival mode, constant desperation.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. It's been, it's just interesting how Ryan had the same behavior set.
Yeah.
I've definitely had the same behavior set. You've had it. I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening to this as well. And did you ever really come to a conclusion or an idea of where this personality trait that we all share comes from, which is, we are problem solvers, meaning if there's not enough money, we'll go out and figure out how to make it. And then we'll immediately see opportunities to utilize that money, and we'll be able to justify it logically. And then boom, we put ourselves right back in that position a couple months later. Yeah.
So I have a little passion in the behavioral studies, like how our mind works, how our behavioral patterns, our habits and stuff. It's just, I don't have any degrees or certifications, and I just read a lot or attend classes and just try to learn this. And there's this concept called Parkinson's Law, which is a law came out in the 1950s, or a theorem, I should say, from a guy named Parkinson. And he was studying human behavior and pointed that as a supply increases in its availability, it's human nature to consume more of it. A classic example is with food. Like if you put a cookie in front of me, I love cookies. You put a cookie in front of me, I'll eat a cookie. If you put 15 cookies in front of me, I'll eat more than a cookie. I'll probably eat, as many as I can, 12 or 13, or maybe I'll somehow sneak in 15. So what he pointed to is, as there's more available resources, we use it far more liberally. Toothpaste. I don't know if you ever noticed, but a full tube of toothpaste, we blow through that in like 3-4 weeks. An empty tube of toothpaste miraculously can last 3 or 4 weeks, because when there's less supply, we become very frugal in its use. We become highly innovative, twisting and turning and doing things to extract toothpaste to keep it going. Well, this is true for money too. When we're flush in money, we become very liberal in its use. And we don't even notice. It's like the subconscious just jam another cookie in my mouth kind of mentality. And when there's very little of it, then we become very frugal in its use. We become very aware, acutely aware of how little there is. But we also become innovative. We're able to stretch out our resources. So that theorem kind of argues why our behavior shifts with supply, but also we can channel Parkinson's Law to be our ally. That's how I design Profit First. It leverages the Parkinson's Law theorem to actually achieve the end goals we want without having to change who we are.
So that's what I love about the book, because you took this problem and you figured out an entire process and a solution for it that you really map out step by step for everybody. So could you walk us through your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first understanding is that most entrepreneurs, and I know this now through surveys, I've had the privilege now, Mike, of speaking literally all over the world and to audiences of 2,000 to 2,000. And I'll ask the same question. I said, who here reverts to what's called bank balance accounting? Meaning you log into your bank account to see if you have money and make decisions around that. And I ask for people's candor and honesty. And I would say easily 90% to 95% of the audience raises their hand. And I then explain that this is your biggest ally, that realizing what your existing behavior is. And ever since the invention of modern accounting, about 300 years ago, accountants have been begging with us entrepreneurs to not log into our bank accounts. They're telling us, look at those documents and sheets from your accounting system because that's more reflective of your business. But we continue, even against their direction, for 300 years, resisting that and logging into our bank accounts. That's our established pattern. The goal is, if you want to achieve a new result, first is, can you achieve that result by continuing a habit and just channeling it? You'll have far more success than trying to break a habit. More people are successful going from a cigarette to a electronic cigarette as opposed to going from a cigarette to nothing, because you got to continue the habit. So what we do with Profit First is we realize we log into our bank accounts. We have to set up multiple accounts at the bank. The goal here is to pre-allocate money to its intended purpose before we use it. Most of us have what's called a primary checking account. I'll put all my deposits in there and I'll pay all my bills from it, which makes sense. But the problem is now we're serving up one big plate of cash. And remember that analogy I use with cookies: the bigger the plate, the more we consume. If we have one single account, we put all of our deposits in there, we'll look at it and say $10,000 of deposits came in. We'll say, oh, I have $10,000 for my business, which right there, we've made a bad assumption. That's not $10,000 for the business, has intended purposes it needs to serve. There's going to be tax consequences. We need to pay the owner of the business. And what about profitability? So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate this money into different accounts. I suggest that we actually set up we call the 5 foundational accounts for every business. The first account acts as a serving tray. It's the inbound or depository only account. We call it income. And when money comes in, it simply sits here waiting to be carved up. Kind of like the analogy I like to use is a turkey for Thanksgiving. When you serve the turkey, you never tell the guests when you pull it out of the oven, hey, everyone grab a knife and fork, everyone for themselves, fight for it. Of course not. You carve the turkey and you give some to everyone so everyone has a portion. We're going to do the same thing. This income account is our cash turkey, if you will, for our business. It's simply for display purposes and waiting to be carved up. Then we carve it up as follows: the next 4 accounts. One's called profit. Profit, just be clear on this, is a reward to the shareholders for taking the risk of starting or investing in this business. So if you are a shareholder in the business, you will share in the profit. This is something every large corporation does, or most of them do. Every publicly traded company will do quarterly profit distributions, and they reward the shareholders. You're not expected to if you own Ford stock like I do, you're not expected to show up at the factory and say, okay, I'm ready to work. No, I took a risk by investing in them, and to keep me engaged, they are rewarding me every quarter with a distribution. That's what this is. By starting a business, you are a shareholder in a company. It happens to be your own company. You started it or invested in it significantly. And the nice thing is, because you own a significant percentage, maybe you have some partners, maybe you own 100%, you get the full or a significant part of the distribution. The next account is called owner's compensation. Owner's compensation is the equivalent of a salary for what I argue is the most important employee in almost every small business, the owner. Rarely have I found any employees that can deliver at the level of the owner. They're not as dedicated. They don't know the business as well. They're not as good salespeople. They're not as good at the delivery side. They definitely don't sacrifice their family and lifestyle like the owner does. And I'll tell you, all those components of sacrifice and hard work, that is a definition of an extraordinary employee. And if the owner doesn't pay themselves like an extraordinary employee, it's only a matter of time before resentment kicks in. My first 2 companies, the horrible truth is I didn't pay myself when I was running those businesses, and then I started to resent them. I couldn't wait to sell either of those companies when I sold them because I was so tired of refinancing my house yet again to cover everyone else's salary and not pay myself.
Yep.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. That's the owner's comp account. So just to be clear, the difference, owner's compensation is to give you a normalized salary as the best employee, consistent pay. That's your lifestyle. The profit is a reward above and beyond, distributed on a quarterly basis to the shareholders. Since you're the owner, you're going to get that as a bonus check. Next account is called tax. When tax season rolls around, so many entrepreneurs, myself in particular, I remember panicking, saying, "Oh my gosh, how much do I owe?" Getting pissed at my accountant. This is highway robbery, and then panicking and struggling to pull that money together to pay the government. Well, the reason we started our business in part is for financial freedom, and financial freedom is where we don't worry about money. So we're not going to worry about it. We're going to have the business worry about it. We're going to allocate from that cash turkey our legal responsibility to pay our income tax. So the business will allocate money for that. And then the final fifth account is called operating expenses. That's what the business operates off of. That's the business's lifestyle. And just to give us some clarity, the percentages change based upon the size of the business and what we're targeting, and we grow into different percentages. But really healthy companies that do, let's say, $2 million in revenue will be allocating, we found, about 10% of their money toward profit, 10% toward the owner's compensation, 15% toward taxes, and the remaining 65% toward operating expenses, which means if $1,000 comes in today, $100 is being reserved for profit, $100 is being reserved to pay the owner, $150 for taxes, and we only have $650 to run the business. The mistake in the past was $1,000 came in, we say, "Oh, we have $1,000 for the business." And that's not true. We have $650 to run the business. And here's one thing I found out very quickly on as businesses started to roll this out. People say, "But Mike, I have more bills than this. I can't pay my bills." Here's the golden lesson. When you implement profit first and you can't pay your bills, that's your business telling you you can't afford those bills. There's something fundamentally wrong. We're incurring too many expenses, or our margins are not properly set and we need to sell at a better margin. But the fix needs to be applied. You don't steal from the profit account because that unwinds the system. You don't steal from your own account. That unwinds the system. When you can't pay your bills, you have to modify how you're operating the business. By doing this, the business starts to, I'm doing air quotes here, starts to speak to you and tell you what it needs to reverse engineer that profitability that you've committed to. And that's the basic setup of profit first at the banks.
And then can you talk a little bit about how you create separation of church and state, if you will, meaning where you set up some accounts at one bank and some accounts at another bank?
Yeah. So, this was all trial by fire for myself. And I set this up. And I remember 9 years ago doing this, and my first deposit came in. It was like $300. And I had these allocation percentages very similar to this. I remember putting 10%, $30 in the profit. I felt like gold. I'd never had taken a profit in my life. And now there was actually this account with money piling up, and I paid myself and so forth. But then I couldn't pay bills. And what I did, I said, well, I can't pay bills this month. Let me just borrow from the profit account, take that $30 out plus whatever else I'd accumulated, and I'll pay it back, which I never did. And that defeats the entire system. When we take from the profit account to pay our bills, let's rename the profit account Peter. Let's rename the bill account or OPEX account Paul, because we're stealing from Peter to give to Paul. It defeats the system. So to separate church and state, what we do is we set up additional accounts. Those 5 foundational accounts, I suggest you set up at your existing bank. If you like working with your bank, then keep working with your bank. If your bank, by the way, argues they're going to charge fees, realize your bank is a vendor just like any other vendor. They're a business that's negotiable. And if they're not willing to negotiate discounted or no fees whatsoever, I think that is a judgment of how interested they are in earning your business. So as a heads up, you have strength here. I would argue also find a second bank. Then the funny thing is the first bank, you want convenience, you want accessibility. The second bank, you want actually the polar opposite. You want the most inconvenient bank you can find. You don't want starter checks or online banking or ATM cards because you don't want accessibility to the money. You want it to be what's called a depository only account, where you transfer money in. And the only way to withdraw money is by driving over to the bank in person, asking the bank manager to write out a cashier's check to you. The goal with the second bank is to make it inconvenient, meaning a distance from you or hard to access. I would literally find a bank that's 3 or 4 hours away from you and make sure you have no online accounting or any of that stuff, online access. And by the way, if they force online access, because so many banks, of course, have that now, just make sure you don't ever set it up or don't have a password for it or give it to a loved one to never share with you just so it's hidden away. Then when you feel you compelled to withdraw money, you got to make a 3 or 4 hour drive. I call it the drive of shame to think, are you stealing from yourself here? Or are you doing it for the purpose you should use the money for? Now, when that money's reserved, there's 2 accounts we set up there. One's a profit hold. It's to accumulate our profit, a very tempting account to borrow from. Now it's out of sight, it's out of mind. The second account is taxes. For many businesses, if you're an LLC or sole proprietorship or some form of hybrid, you'll have quarterly distributions. If you're an S Corp or C Corp, you'll actually have your taxes, your personal taxes pulled from your checking, your payroll, but your business can reimburse you through a distribution, and we'll pull that out on a quarterly basis too. So either way, the company is paying your taxes. Those accounts, while they accumulate, we have them out of sight, out of mind. Then once a quarter, we make a drive over there to withdraw the money. Now, I'm a major advocate of removing temptation because I know my willpower, it's like any other muscle, it's fatigues, but my willpower seems to be particularly weak when it comes to cookies and money. So I got a dual signature on my account. So the only way I can withdraw money is that I get a check from the bank. I can write my own checks, but there has to be a second signature. The second authorized signature is a colleague, or I should say really a friend of mine, but an accountability partner. He has no interest in my business. He's between me and you, Mike, he's a little bit of a dick. He's a stinge. Like, he won't sign it. And dude, I've been doing this process for 9 years now, Mike. And I last year had enough of my profit distribution to go on a vacation with my family to Ireland for 2 weeks to really live it up, go in castles and all that stuff. And so I went to my accountability partner, Joe, and said, "Hey, Joe, can you sign this check? Because I need to pay off my reservations." He says, "You're not going to use it for expenses, right?" I said, "Joe, of course not. We've been through this. Profit is for the reward and celebration of the shareholder. Of course, it all goes to me." He says, "Before I sign on this, can you show me the reservations for your trip?" I mean, that's how much of a stinge this guy is, which is wonderful. It's a pain in the ass when it's happening, but it's wonderful because he's holding me accountable to using profit distributions for its only intended purpose, which is celebration, which also forces the business to run properly and healthily off of the operating expense account, that remaining money.
Yeah, absolutely. So you walk everybody through the system in really, really step-by-step detail. What have you seen has been the outcome for entrepreneurs who've adopted this process? What are some of the big success stories that you've seen?
So the big success stories, many businesses are blown away by how much profit they can achieve and how simple it is. There's always flip sides to it too. The risk is people see this as too simple. Like, really? You're saying set different accounts? It sounds like a shell game. Is that really going to work? It's mythology. But it's not in practice. Like I said, we have over 100,000 businesses doing it. And so the first thing is many businesses early on are blown away how easy it is to allocate money to a profit and how much clarity they get on what's truly available for their business. The other big surprise is when tax time comes, April 15th, I can't wait for it. The emails pour in every quarter, but particularly April 15th, with people celebrating that they're paying taxes, like literally excited about it, which sounds totally odd. But when your business has reserved all your tax liability for you and nothing comes out of your own pocket, that is an amazing feeling. So it changes that emotion, which is the most unexpected, bizarre thing. My favorite stories, though, are in growth, because a lot of people I speak to that hear about this concept say, "Okay, I get it, but I need every penny to grow my organization." And I also ask them, "Well, why? What's your intention around growing your organization? Why do you want to grow it?" And they say, "Well, because I want to get bigger." I'll say, "Okay, why do you want to get bigger?" They're like, "To make more money." And I'm like, "Okay, to be profitable?" They're like, "Exactly. So I want to grow to be profitable." So I'm like, "Well, why don't we just skip the grow to be profitable part and start baking in a healthy profit habit from day one? So as you grow, it's already there." So that's a little bit of an aha. But here was the shocking reality. Businesses that implement profit first, on average, are growing faster than their industry competitors. So they're growing faster than the industry average, yet they're more profitable. So this triggered research. What happens is when you take your profit first, it forces your business to focus on the things that are working and amplify it to do more of what's working. And it forces you to stop taking unqualified risks. Everyone else does Facebook ads. I'll do Facebook ads. And then you spend 50 grand. You're like, "Well, that didn't work." That stuff, we think a lot more clearly about it. My favorite story is this one organization. It's a baseball team that they implemented profit first and experienced radical growth. Before I tell you the name of this baseball team, let me tell you the end result. This baseball team has sold out 4 consecutive seasons, and what they call full sellouts, which means the entire stands are packed with people. It is a minor league / all-star team, so it's not a major league team. They are the most profitable team by far in their league, and they're the only team to get attendance over 4,000 people per game, where the average competitor has 250 people per game. The team is called the Savannah Bananas. And I encourage anyone listening in, when you get a second, Google these people, because what they've done is nothing short of remarkable. Here's how it played out. They implemented profit first, and they realized trying to run a baseball team off of 250 attendees is effectively impossible. So they then said, well, we want to achieve profit. We're going to start allocating it. But this already is immediately forcing us to determine what's working, what's not working, and change things up. Well, they realized, shock of shocks, that most people find baseball relatively boring. Even the people that are attending the games, what they do like is the entertainment. But because they were taking their profit first, they couldn't afford to hire entertainment. They couldn't even have a mascot running around. So what they did is they said, well, we have these 20 or 30 players that show up. Why don't we make them the entertainers? So literally the very first day of practice at a Savannah Bananas practice session, you don't learn to throw faster or catch better, pitch harder. What you learn is how to line dance on the first practice. And they've had like serious athletes come through this place. Russell Wilson, I think, who went on to be a quarterback for the Seahawks, played at the Savannah Bananas as an example. And they now do these absurd things. I went to the opening game 2 years ago. After hearing about Profit First, they invited me down. They let me throw out the opening pitch. It was the experience of a lifetime. 4,000 people in the stands. And they announced they're going to do the banana in the pants routine, which is not what you think. And what happens is people start bolting to the upper deck. It's like 2.5 stories up in the air. People are running up there, and there's these bananas up there, which the owners found a way to get free bananas for every single game, which is unbelievable. But Profit First made them do it. People grab these bananas and they throw them off the top of the bleachers, and the baseball players have put these balloon pants on and are running around trying to catch the banana in their pants. And the crowd loses their mind. My favorite was the opening. After the opening pitch, the owner of the team announces to the audience, would any of the parents here like to share their baby? Literally, that's the words, share their baby with us. And moms come running down the steps with babies, carrying them like footballs, like it's Herschel Walker running down these stands. And they run as fast as they can to get to where the owner is. And the owner will randomly pick out of the 20 babies presented, one baby. They take the baby, put the baby in a banana costume, bring him to the pitcher's mound when all the players surround him so you can't see the baby. And all of a sudden, all the baseball players start kind of waggling their fingers up in the air. You can't see the baby because the baby's held down. And then you start hearing Hakuna Matata, the Lion King. And all of a sudden, out of the middle leaps the owner with the baby, holding him high up in the air like he's the Lion King. And the audience loses their shit. It is out of control. As a result, the most profitable baseball team, the most innovative baseball team, they even changed their name. They used to be called the Savannah Sand Crickets, or Sand Gnats. I mean, they changed it to the Savannah Bananas. Their apparel sells like crazy. They figured out what works because they took their profit first. It forced them to reverse engineer radical growth.
That's awesome. Yeah, super cool. That's I'm tempted right now to jump on YouTube to look for some of that footage, but I'll save that for later.
There's one guy, I went down there. There's one guy, they call him the Banana Man. He's a fan. He's simply a fan. He has this beard, like a ZZ Top beard. It goes down to his waistline. Every game, he forms it in the shape of a massive banana. His beard.
Huh.
And so he's a spectacle, and people can't wait to see the Banana Man. So Savannah Bananas is so sharp that they've built this brand and loyalty that literally is now perpetuating itself. They don't pay a penny to this guy. The guy's investing in himself, walking around, and he's become a hero for this event, along with countless other people that are doing remarkable things.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that trip people up and that they procrastinate on, or that could make this fail for them? I totally get the pushback from folks who are like, look, I've got to pay my employees this month, and it's going to take all of the money that's in the bank account. Like, logically, that's your only option. Yeah. Right. But if you don't end that cycle, then it's going to continue. And so this is a way to help you pull yourself out of the box and say, okay, well, then maybe I need to let that employee go.
It forces those hard decisions, but those are the right decisions.
Yeah.
Too many entrepreneurs say, I'm going to save the employee one more month And literally they compromised the integrity of the entire business to save one person. There was something fundamentally wrong with this business. So when you can't pay the bills, that is your business telling you can't afford these and we have to make adjustments. But there's other parts that people get stuck on, some really minor stuff, but sadly it puts a major roadblock in. The most common resistance I get is, but Mike, if I have to set 5 accounts, what about all the fees I'll experience? These accounts, I'm moving money around. It could be like 10 or 15 bucks a month per account, maybe 30 bucks a account. That's 150 bucks a month. Well, my response to this is, if a bank, as I said earlier, charges you fees, that is a business decision. They are a business. This isn't legally instituted. They can waive that. So if they're not willing to, change it. I literally met a couple. They own a business. I've never heard this before. This is funny. They went to a major bank. They walked in and they said, we want to open these 5 accounts to file profit first, and we won't pay the fees. And the bank manager said, well, sorry, we have fees. They literally had the book with them. They picked up the book and said, look, here's profit first. Read page, whatever it is, 133. It says if the bank isn't willing to waive the fees, that we have the right to walk out and find another bank, negotiate. And he literally gave him the book, and the guy read it. He said, hold on. He went and talked to the bank manager, and sure enough, they waived the fees. So I don't know if that's the exact tactic you want to do, but if you feel afraid of fees, you can negotiate or find another bank. Yeah. Another thing, though, and this is probably the most insidious. Most people say, when they don't do profit first, is, Mike, I'm not profitable now. I can't take my profit first until I'm profitable. And they're thinking they need to solve this before the money will drip down. We have to remember we're behavioral. We have to remember Parkinson's Law. If you're not profitable, you must start a system like this immediately, because it will force you to find that profit. When you take that profit money out first, Parkinson's Law, there's now less toothpaste or less cookies. There's less money. We're going to become much more frugal in its use, much more innovative. So don't think you have to do that. And the last thing, and this is the sad part, is there are still some stalwart old school accountants out there that say, this is not how accounting works. Well, if they say that profit first is not how accounting works, I would really question if that accountant knows anything about accounting, because profit first is not accounting. It is a cash management system. It works with your accounting, but it's a cash management system. It's simply a way to reflect your money. And sure enough, you'll have to set up a couple extra chart of accounts in your accounting system, but that should just take a couple minutes. So some accountants resist this. They say, GAAP accounting is sales minus expenses equals profit. We all know that profit's the bottom line or the year end, which is really bad behavioral vernacular, saying that's the last thing to consider. Like, if profit comes last, that's like saying, you know what, I'm going to start putting my health last. We would never say that. That means it doesn't matter. When something's important, it comes first. So we're just changing the way we manage the cash flow by taking our profit first, and by inherently, it's going to improve our cash flow. And so that's the common challenges I see.
Yeah, no, I've lived it. Like I said, reading through your book was a huge light bulb moment for me, because I was like, my God, this is me. And beside the fact that we share the same first name, we definitely share the same history and habits. With finances. I remember the last big company that I had in around 2012-ish, 2013, we ran into a big upset where we got defrauded by this con man, and business dropped substantially, 70-80% overnight. And I thought I was going to do the heroic thing, which was to weather the storm for as long as I needed to and not fire anyone, because we had about 12 employees at the time. Right. So I was successful in the fact that I did that. I didn't fire anyone for at least a year and a half, at the expense of my house, my savings, my investments, and everything else that I'd ever accumulated. So that's why I really appreciate your work here and the message that you're sharing, because I don't want anyone else to run into this trap. Either.
I appreciate your candor. And, this with entrepreneurship also comes ego and a pride factor. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think many entrepreneurs, all of us, are very compelled to be of service to our employees. We see ourselves in a patriotic or matriarchal position, and patriarchal or matriarchal, and we then sacrifice ourselves. I think the real heroic thing is building a foundationally healthy business. I think the real heroic thing is that my employees, now that I have a fiscally sound business, if business tanks tomorrow, we have over 6 months of reserve just for their payroll sitting there. We call it the vault in this account to protect them. I think that's the heroic thing. I think the fact that I can pay my employees 1.5 times the industry average here compared to where they would get for a similar job elsewhere is the heroic thing. And it really took me getting real with myself that it's really ego about putting on this fictitious healthy thing and growing by numbers of employees and revenue to shift over to what's truly healthy, which is focusing on profit and sustainability. And I think that is the new definition of heroism in your business, is not how big is your business, it's how healthy is your business, how sustainable is it?
Yeah, no, agreed. And, I found since I turned 40 last year that my appetite for taking risks and not being super responsible in this way from a financial perspective with my business, I just don't have the energy to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike.
Like I did in my 20s, where it's like, screw it, let's put all the chips on the table and go for it. So that's a really, really important epiphany for people to have. I wanted to ask you real quick, what are the ways that people can interact with you and your business? You've obviously got a phenomenal collection of books that you've written. Profit First is just one of them. Are there any other services or coaching or anything else that you guys provide?
Yeah. So I have more books. There's a starting point, and I'd love to share the website. Well, we also have, when it comes to Profit First, an organization called Profit First Professionals. These are accountants and bookkeepers who are, to me, the innovative ones. They are the innovators who have mastered Profit First. They've implemented in their own business. They've been audited by our organization, and they've now coached and counseled countless businesses. And we have a global presence. We have an office in the Netherlands, an office, of course, in the US. We have one in Australia. And from those 3 offices, we run our presence throughout the globe. So that's at Profit First Professionals, and there's people that can help. I think the starting point, though, if you want to learn about any of my books, or I used to write for the Wall Street Journal. I have all that available for free. My books, many of the chapter downloads are free. I'm a blogger and a podcaster too. You can go to MikeMichalowicz.com. I was sharing offline with you the shortcut to it is actually Mike Motorbike. The irony is that was my nickname in high school. I've never driven a motorcycle. I guess it was just a funny name. They've had other names, but they were such bastardizations of my name that it's too. The words are inappropriate, we'll say. But if you go to MikeMotorbike.com, that'll bring you to my site, and you can get access to all these materials at no cost, totally free. Very cool.
Very cool. Any last pieces of advice that you think you should talk about before we end that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I got the big one. And it's 2 steps. And I like to share this last, and thanks for offering me the time to do this, is because if you do these 2 things, my promise to you is immediate and permanent profitability, which I know sounds like this outrageous commitment, but here's the 2 steps I ask you to take. And in fact, even though we shared basically the entire system on this podcast, I think if you go into it, it's too abrupt of a change. It's like just right now, stand up and start sprinting. If you haven't stretched out or warmed up, you're putting yourself at risk, actually.
Well, it's like going on a keto diet, cold. Right.
Yeah, right. It may not end too well. So what we're going to do is 2 simple steps. Step 1 is call your existing bank, assuming you like them, and set up an account, savings account called Profit. That's step 1. You can probably go to the bank and get it done within a half hour, but just go get it done. The step 2 is to allocate 1% of any of your income to the Profit account. And the reason I pick 1% is it's such a low bar that it won't have. I argue that you can't have any negative impact on your business. $1,000 deposit comes in. I'm saying take $10. That's 1%. Put in the Profit account and run the remainder, the $990, through your business like you normally do. So by doing this, it'll have no negative impact. Anyone can take 1%, but it'll have an extraordinary impact because now you're starting the profit habit. Yes, you've achieved permanent and immediate profitability. You got $10 set aside. Do this again. Stick with that 1%. Then, sure enough, over time, when you feel it's right, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 months, then go to 2%, and then 3 and 4. And I found businesses that start with this very low threshold have the greatest success. They slowly build the profit muscle. Maybe it takes them a year or 2, but then they're hitting numbers out of the park that they could have only dreamt about.
Very cool. I love it. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your message. Guys, if you run a business, you need to go buy this book. I can't tell you how much pain and frustration it can save you. So, and I also, Mike, saw on your website under the resources section that you have an area where people can reach out to you guys to connect with one of your certified CPAs or bookkeepers. So
there you go.
If someone doesn't have one, or if they want someone who is versed in this methodology, they can connect with someone just through your office. So I think that's super valuable as well.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And thanks for having me on your show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much, as always, for listening. We'll see you next week. Take care.